All right, everybody, we are live again. Dynasty Mirror, Search for Uhuru. And I have the brother Ishmael on with us this Saturday afternoon from Afropolitan Insights. I've been trying to catch up with this brother for a minute now. So we finally linked up. And today's topic, and we're going to cover a little bit of everything, is Africans and African Americans need to focus on what unites us, not on what divides us. Um, Now, Ishmael, let me tell everybody where you're from, and then also too, we go right. If we could go ahead and jump right into it, if you could tell everyone what Afropolitan Insights does, your platform as well.
Okay. So yeah, I'm from Ghana, from Accra. I came here, went to college. I went to Columbia undergrad. Um, Spent a year at the Harvard Innovation Lab, working on a tech startup. After that, I basically created the Afropolitan Insights platform. And the whole objective of the platform was to essentially just have a space where we can talk about issues that pertain to um, Black people in the diaspora, as well as Africans back at home, to just create a kind of like um, a, a platform or a space where we can come and have conversations concerning issues that concerns all of us. And the reason why that was something that I thought was important was because my friends and I were hanging out. This was back in Harlem, and we were
Mm.
just talking about just like political issues. And I was like, yo, these are like really interesting conversations that we're having. Why are we not having these conversations in a space where others can be part of this conversation? So that led to creating the Afropolitan Insights platform. Obviously, the term Afropolitan, um, the use of the term Afropolitan is important because it's a term that was coined by Taye Selassie, who was trying to find a word that explained where she came from. Because her mom is from Nigeria and her dad is from Ghana, and I believe she went to Yale and was in London and had moved in all these different places, and she was trying to explain that there is like a whole generation of Africans, and this particularly concerns the generation after independence, where Nkrumah did this, a lot of other African leaders did this, sent a generation of African intellectuals abroad to go and study and come back home and help lead the country or run the country. But when they came, in the 70s, there was like a whole wave of coup d'etats in a lot of African countries that had become independent. And so
Right.
some of these intellectuals couldn't go back home because of the instability that was back home. And so they stayed, whether in Europe or in the US, gave birth to kids whom had African names but had American accents or European accents or spoke European languages. And some of these kids were coming of age and they were trying to figure out how they could connect themselves back to the continent. But what I thought was peculiar in the power of that word was the opportunity to make that word represent a little more than just Africans in the diaspora, but more specifically Black people in the diaspora who had come of age and wanted to connect to the continent. And so the use of the word Afropolitan and obviously insights being that we want it to be a space where we are sharing insights, sharing ideas, having conversations about things and not just gossip or just, fashion or just, the next, who said what, but to actually have deep conversations within the community about things that we care about. The other thing was also just that we, as young Africans at the time, were really eager to connect with like our African American cousins. And
Mm. Hey,
I
repeat that again. That's important. Repeat that again. Repeat that again. That's important.
and this was in Colombia at the time, African students at the time were really eager to connect with our, African American cousins. And this obviously was pre-Wakanda and um, uh, even pre-Obama, right? So this was like a time where your African accents didn't get you talking to anyone when you step into a room. And I'm actually not gonna say a blanket statement here because as a young African in America, older African Americans were very good to me and very helpful to me and very kind to me. So I still don't want to make a blanket statement and say, oh, African Americans weren't nice to us at a certain point in time. But in college specifically, it was just a lot difficult to connect to our African American cousins at the time. I think like recently I've been visiting the campus and stuff like that, and they are all like bonding and chilling and doing stuff that we couldn't do at the time. Like there was respect, but there was like a safe distance, which some people kept, not everyone, obviously. But we basically wanted to figure out, how do we connect? How do we engage in conversations? How do we actually let these distant cousins of ours know that we want to know who they are? We want to, and this is why, coming to the topic that we are trying to address today. This is why when I hear people saying, oh, Africans don't like African Americans, and they say that we don't appreciate African Americans and stuff like that. I disagree. I think yes, there is room for Africans, especially Africans that arrive in America, to learn a bit more in a constructive way about the struggle of African Americans prior to Africans arriving here in masses, and to know about the work that Black people have done, period, that we have come to benefit from. That is something that is important. But even before that, I think folks should know that back home there are young Africans that are trying to slang, that are trying to that use the N word referring to themselves because they see hip hop artists referring to themselves with the N word. That adore Oprah Winfrey and Michael Jordan and Tupac and Biggie, and that try to act cool, that say they are from Brooklyn, even though they have no idea where Brooklyn is, and stuff like that, just because of the impact of African American culture on, like, just the global impact of African American culture, and especially in Africa, right? So there is a sense of like just adoration and respect that we have when we get here as young ones, just just like it's almost like seeing a stars, because as obviously our sense of whom African Americans are have been through things that we've seen on TV. And for the most part, it's mostly been through hip hop, it's been through sports, and it's been through TV shows like the Cosby Show and Oprah Winfrey Show and stuff like that. And so we come here, thinking of African Americans as stars and celebrities and
Right.
folks that have done amazing things, and we want to meet them and we want to connect with
Can
them.
can I chime in real quick? So the misconception that all African Americans are stars and celebrities. When you move to now, you went to Columbia. Columbia is in New York City, correct?
Right.
When you move to New York City and you notice poverty and poor amongst the Black community,
Mhm.
what kind of shock did that give you? Like, were you surprised? Like, how did that affect you? Like, did that open your eyes up?
Well, so that definitely, so that was a shocker, right? That was something that opened my eyes up. So this is like literally Harlem that we are talking about here, like
Mhm.
just seeing homeless people, folks begging, begging on the streets and stuff like that. That's definitely something that was a shocker. The thing was, there really wasn't any way to understand what was going on, right? There was no way to process what was going on. It was like, oh my God, it's just the way it is. And so it's something that it's almost like you brush aside. You kind of, it's almost like, oh, there's like this one exception, right? Or obviously I have lived around longer enough to realize that this is something that is systematic, and that's like a whole different conversation.
Right.
But at the onset, when you just don't want that bubble to burst, because you're like, nah, like, you know Black folks in America are wealthy and are successful.
Right.
And with time, that wears down, and with time, reality sets in, right? But it's just one of those things that with time, you begin to understand, and then you begin to ask yourself why. And I think the why, and the when and the what is what most Africans have not, you know, have the opportunity to be able to get into, because there's just a huge population of Africans that get here that go to work and bury themselves in work, or that go to school and bury themselves in it. And so then comes the other narrative, right,
Mm-hmm.
about why immigrants come here and succeed and those that are here are not succeeding, etc., etc. Obviously, if you want to dig further into that, you will know a lot of these are systematic, and you will know that a lot of these have to do with things that have been, put into a system that prevents certain people from benefiting from opportunities within the system, whether from the kind of names that they have, or from the accents that they have, or from little things like having been to prison before, etc., etc. But that and these are things that I get to learn because I went to college and chose, sociology, a subject that actually spent time explaining how communities work or how societies work and the impact of certain things. So even if you came here and you still got education and you became, like, say, a computer science major, you probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to study and understand that some of these things are inbuilt into the American system. And so when some racist person tells you, oh, you came here as an immigrant and you're doing well for yourself, such a shame that other Black folks that have been here haven't done the same. When you do not know the nuances behind what that person is saying, you just think, oh, yeah, it's true. How come I'm here working hard and doing this? It's like, listen, man, if you thought it was just hard work alone, African Americans are the hardest working people, some of the hardest working people that you meet in this country, period. So if you thought it was just hard work alone, then that doesn't deal with it, or that doesn't address it. But unfortunately, folks do not have the lens through which they can be able to understand some of these things that happen. And so narratives have been created that cause tension between us as communities, and so we act in ignorant ways towards each other and ignorant things about each other.
Can you go into some of those narratives?
Well, so that is, I think, one of the most prevailing ones.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I think one of the most prevailing ones is like the one that I shared, and I think that is spun into like different things. But it's just the idea that, oh, immigrants that come here are harder working than some of the locals, and so immigrants are taking advantage of opportunities that exist for everyone. But well, there are folks here that work as hard but are not given those opportunities when they walk through the door, just by mentioning their name or just by their accents being heard. And so there are people that do not think about both things that are going on, and so they basically assume that what they are being fed is what it is. Okay, and so that is kind of part of what I think are some of the things that have contributed to the disintegration of relations between African American community and Africans. And I think that now that there is an opportunity for, especially through media, like there are a lot of conversation happening online. Now there are opportunities for African Americans and Africans to actually talk directly to each other and get to have conversations about these things. I think the blinders will be taken off, and we'll get to know each other for what we are and who we are. And I think that is where a relationship based on honesty and truth begins to build. But the point that I really wanted to make in this conversation is that a lot of us Africans, like, we adore our African American cousins. Like, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand. And that's something that I think is important, because there is only one side of the narrative that is being put out there, and it is about, oh, how we hate each other or how we disrespect each other. I'm like, nah. Like, I know a whole generation of people that came to this country just excited about who African Americans are, and wanting to connect, and there just weren't enough opportunities to be able to do that, because every time that some of us tried, a distance was built. And I thought what was actually also the other thing that I thought was really confusing was that, like, our Caribbean cousins embraced us, like, no questions asked. It was just like, and so that was, as a young college student, it was like really confusing. It was like, wait, how come there's this one Black person that actually welcomes you and treats you like a cousin who just left home and is back, and there is the other one that it's like, wait, obviously with time you begin to understand why some of these things exist, but these are conversations that we should be having, so we can tear down those walls and build towards unity. And I don't think this is something that is just going to happen overnight. This this is like a process. This is something that we are going to have to work towards, because I think that is the next front, that's the next step for us as far as community relations.
Right.
But before you ask your next question, there is something that I want to say to those who doubt the um, the possibility in us being able to build bridges as Black people in the diaspora and on the continent.
Go ahead.
And that is this: that you always have to remember this. When the Negritude movement was formed,
The who movement?
the Negritude movement. So the Negritude movement was
In Haiti, right? The Negritude, right?
right. So you are talking about these were mostly French philosophers or Francophone philosophers. So you are also talking about Césaire from Martinique, Saint Martin or Martinique, and then you are talking about um, um, Senghor from Senegal, right? And so these were mostly French intellectuals who came up with the idea of, Black being beautiful. And actually, the Black is Beautiful movement started in the U.S., but the Negritude movement rubbed off the Black is Beautiful movement as well, and they started actively speaking against um, uh, uh, I guess the influence of colonialism and speaking against the idea that Eurocentric views were superior to African views, right? But that movement transitioned into the Pan-African movement, which was strongly supported by Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois played a huge role in the formation of the Organization of African Unity, the OAU. Du Bois, you are talking about Du Bois, you are talking about Nkrumah. I want people to remember those eras. And the reason why I think it's important for them to understand this is that Ghana, who really is the first sub-Saharan African country to be independent, wasn't independent on its own. There was a lot of support. There was a lot of help coming from the civil rights organizations that were fighting for freedom here and that were channeling resources and ideas and intellectual power to our leaders that were fighting for independence in Ghana. And so, and the civil rights movement didn't only stop with Ghana. Through the 70s, a lot of the African countries that became independent had massive support coming from Black people in America. The only reason why this
okay, you just mentioned a great point, because the concept of Pan-Africanism was really founded in the West amongst the Black diaspora, then it spread. But from what I'm starting to notice is, as Africa develops this Pan-African, I would say, ideology or adopts it, they're not including the diaspora. Now, Ghana has the year of return, but it's just, why is that?
Well, so I think that the Pan-Africanist movement was a movement that actually was birthed from intellectuals on both sides of on both ends of the river, if you want to put it that way. I think folks like Nkrumah, like I said, W.E.B. Du Bois. Well, I mean, on one hand, you can argue that they were here in the West at the time, right?
But the idea of Pan-Africanism was back. I mean, we were talking Pan-Africanism, Marcus Garvey, Martin Delany. I mean, this is the 19th century.
Well, so okay, so when okay, oh, sorry, hold on.
Wait.
Okay, so when I talk about the Pan-Africanist movement, I guess the roots of the movement goes like deeper. So yes, there are all these waves of leaders and intellectuals that started at an era which basically ended up at a time that these African countries started gaining independence. Mm-hmm. So yes, agree with that. I think that there was a time when the shift focused solely on African countries becoming independent, and that is kind of when I would say maybe Blacks in the diaspora were sort of left behind because the focus became about liberating Africa as a continent. And at the time, again, when you're talking specifically the 60s and the 70s, there were struggles that were going on here that also needed attention. And I think that is where sort of that initial unity that was had about liberating Black people around the world kind of fell off a bit, because it was like, oh, wait, we are here still struggling. You guys are becoming independent, and you are getting your countries back. And we are here and not kind of getting back the kind of things that we are asking for, so to speak, right? And so the reason why I wanted to bring this up was that I feel like there was a point in history where Black people were able to unite towards Black liberation around the world, and that kind of fell off when African countries started becoming independent,
Mm-hmm.
because they were getting their countries back, they were getting their things back, and the same wasn't happening in other parts of the world. So I personally think that if the kind of objectives that drove Black people together can be reignited, there would be a stronger sense of unity, but also with purpose. Because if we unite and we do not have a cause for our unity, then what are we working towards, right? There was a question that you just asked that I feel like I missed. It was around the year of the return and Blacks being left behind. If you want to refresh that question
No, no,
again.
no, no, no. Because like I said, it's just I think but Ghana's finally, rolled out the year of return, and this is the first time an African country has rolled out some type of initiative or program for the Black diaspora or descendants of slaves who were against their will taken from Africa and sent to the West. And I'm just so shocked that it's taken this long to have something formal for the diaspora, and I just don't get it. Because I mean, if you look at history, especially with Black America, and guys, I know people keep saying don't leave out the Caribbean, the other diaspora. I'm speaking from a Black American perspective because that's who I am. But we're all one, and I apologize. I'm not maliciously trying to leave the entire diaspora out. But Black America, going from Booker T. Washington, Martin Delany, the AME Church, we've always been engaged with Africa, even during the racial terrorism we were facing, Jim Crow, war on drugs. We have always been engaged with Africa, but it has not been reciprocated. So that's why I'm just shocked that it's taken this long for a country to finally roll out some formal program or initiative welcoming the diaspora back home.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right about that. I think this should have happened sooner. And I think the reason why that is happening now is probably because there seemed to be a structure in place. Because I think last year the Ministry of Tourism was traveling around the country. And my friend Diallo in DC with the Edincraft group was, telling me about this, and I think they came out here and connected with groups locally to be able to kind of set the right network and put things in place for something like this to be launched. And a lot of these things come with like having a structure in place and the organization needed to make happen. And so, I'm happy that it's happening right now. Having said that, however, I believe about a decade ago, there was a festival back in Ghana called PanAfest. It was a Pan-African festival that was held in, I believe I was a kid at the time. I believe it was in like Cape Coast at the time. And that was, that was a festival, but it was still a festival that was planned around the return of African Americans again to the continent. But it had more of a festive, celebratory vibe to it. And it was around music and culture, if I can remember. But this definitely is one that is head on, come home, come see where we are, come see what's going on, come see, what you would like to do if the opportunity is here for you. Welcome whenever you want. And I think this is something that should have happened sooner. So I agree with you. I agree with you about that.
Shout out to King Joseph. You are welcome. Everyone, can we please hit that like button and get the likes up? Now, Ishmael, we had a question in the chat room or a statement. Is it hard for Africans when they come to America to accept that they should be Black first and not country or tribe first once they get to America? Because as you said, the police, white people, even in Africa, when white people colonized Africa and drew their borders and created the country of Ghana and the country of Nigeria, the last thing on their mind was what tribe you were from. They
Mhm,
strictly colonized you guys,
mhm,
colonized us based
mhm,
on color.
mhm.
What's what's taking a lot of Africans so long to realize that we are black first and
Okay.
not tribe first? If that
Right.
makes sense.
So here's something that you should kind of think about, right? Like here, when you're in the States, um, you can leave Atlanta and visit New York very easily. You
Right.
can you go to LA, you can a lot of us Africans, the first time we get to meet other Africans um, is when we come here to college, right? So um, even the idea of being anything than what you are is 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 a concept that becomes very new to us when we get here, because all we know is being Ghanaian or being Ghana or being this person or that person, the way you identify back home. The idea of blackness is a very foreign concept to you as an African until you arrive here and you get addressed as a black person,
Right.
because it is not you have not had the need to identify as black before. You are who you are. That is just enough. You don't carry an ID card to prove who you are or be defined by what the ID card says about you. That is something that is still very foreign. That is like a concept that a lot of us have never a concept that is very foreign to us, period. And so we come here, and that is the first time that some of these things begin to occur to us. And so with time, um, most people begin to come to terms with the fact that, oh, wait, I'm black. And some people then begin to look into what that means, right? And
Right.
and so there is first there is a shock, then there is okay coming to terms with that and trying to figure out what that means, and then you begin to see the connotations of what it means to be black in America. And to be fair, Africans coming from our own country experience a certain level of privilege that Africans that are born here or black people that are in America do not have, as far as just being born in a space where everyone is black and you are never questioned. Your identity is not something that you even have to think about and define. It's just an extension of you. You speak your language, you eat your food, you dance your dances, you play
Right.
soccer, you go to school, etc. And so when you get here and all of that is just thrown at you, I think the initial after the initial shock, it's something that is like, like what is this? And is this something that I now have to like dig into? Because there's an identity crisis. You
Right.
can, or what some people do, distance themselves from, you know what? I'm a guest in America. I came here to get my education. I came here to make some money, and I'm back home, right? So there are different reactions to it. It's not a uniform reaction. But the reason why there is that reaction is just because most folks are usually just not used to the idea of of identifying as black, and so it's a foreign concept to them. It, as black, the way we understand blackness in America today, right? So it's a foreign concept to us arriving, and it's like, hold on a minute, there is this thing that has been going on. Oh snap, like what do I do with this? I don't even understand the history of this. I don't even know anything behind this. Is this something I'm going to take on as a burden and work through, or I'm just going to focus on what I'm supposed to be doing here and move on? And you have to understand this. A lot of Africans that are coming into this country are usually very young kids coming to college. Like a lot, I mean, granted, there are also older people that come and work, but like a huge majority. So a lot of these things going on are things that they've just not had the opportunity to think through before. And they also don't have anyone guiding them to process any of these things. Like when you get to college, um, you don't have, as part of your orientation, there is nothing happening that is helping you like know that these are things that exist and that you have to work through. When I was at Columbia had a dorm, and this place used to have Monday night conversations called Rooted, which was like community organizations, and those were the places that I went every Monday, and I began to learn about some of these things that we are talking about, like classism, racism, and like who the middle class is, and you know, and the politic of America. That is something that when you come in as a young African person, if someone doesn't guide you through it, you don't have a clue. So what do? You throw that in the garbage because you're like, I don't even know what's going on. I don't even understand this conversation. I don't know the history of it. What role can I play in it? I don't know. I'll just do me and steady. That's like a 17-year-old person processing how to, how to deal with the fact that they are being addressed as a Black person. Some people embrace it. Some people get lucky. They connect with other people that help them through it. And I think this is something the Caribbean students, African students, African American students associations on campus could do some work around, where they can do like joint orientations for each other when freshmen come in every year, and they, and create a nice structure where we introduce ourselves to each other. And so that becomes a beautiful foundation to build your 4-year college career on, knowing that you have a community that you identify with and build with as you go through school. But unfortunately, it's so fragmented that, it's an opportunity that is wasted. And so that is the reason why there is that resistance of the idea of being, do I identify as Black? I don't know. Am I Black? I'm Nigerian, or I'm Ghanaian, or I'm whatever. It's like, because folks don't even understand what that means, and sometimes they're associated with being a burden, and they don't want to go there, right? So that's basically what it is.
Mm. Let's see what we got here in the chat room. Everybody, get the likes up, please. We have 200 people watching, only 85 likes. Let's hit that. Let's hit that like button as we come into the chat room, please. Now, Ishmael, what? This is my thing. China. I'll give you this example with China. So the Chinese, they sent Chinese to the West, and their objective was to learn the technology, learn the information, and bring it back to China and build up China. Now, if they didn't follow their orders,
right,
the families could have been killed, kidnapped, arrested, or whatnot if they did not return, the ones that were sent to the West, to pretty much learn the technology and come back.
Right.
What I'm starting to notice is that a lot of African immigrants are getting very comfortable here in America or in the West and not going back. This book right here, shout out to Tyreen Wright, everybody. Tyreen Wright, Booker T. Washington, The Making of a Pan-Africanist. So Booker T. Washington had the Tuskegee model, which pretty much, to sum it up, was putting Black Americans in a position to be self-sufficient.
Okay.
He also reached out to Africa and brought African students to his university, which is Tuskegee University in Alabama, but told them, like, look, you come here to learn, and you need to go back and help build Africa. What are your thoughts on that, as far as, immigrants not going back and staying here in the West?
Well, so one of the things that you have to look at is you look at the Chinese, the structure that the Chinese have in place, and you compare that to what we have, and you realize that there are like huge differences in both structures, right? Now, when I was explaining the concept of Afropolitanism, I was explaining that when you look at the first generation of African intellectuals that came here to college, a lot of them came on scholarships from their governments, and the requirement was to return home because of the source of the funding for their education, so that they could go back home and actually contribute to the development of their countries, which is essentially what is happening in China right now. The Chinese government is paying for your fees, so obviously you have to go back home. The Chinese government is taking care of you here, but what we have here is, unfortunately, most governments are not actually doing that right now. They are not taking any responsibility or playing any role in the brightest or some of the best students that they have in being able to acquire skills here to go back home. And so you have individuals that are doing this on their own, right? And so they end up making these decisions. And so when you have someone who is not from a well-to-do background back home that gets here, pays so much money, signs all these student loans, gets this education, the first objective is, how do I pay back my loans? How do I make some money, before the conversation of going back home happens? But I agree with you. If there was a structure in place where, Nigeria was sending a group of students to come here, and, on scholarships. And I think that is happening to a certain extent, especially in Texas, where I believe there is like a mutual exchange between oil states and some of some African countries where engineers are brought to come and acquire certain skills so they can go back home and help develop some of the infrastructure back home. I think if that is something that the government is getting involved, a lot more folks will be able to go back home because folks will have fewer burdens to deal with and the need to stay longer to generate a certain level of revenue before going back home. But for folks that their entire village contributed to their college, their plane ticket, their college fees, etc., etc. It becomes important for them to generate at least some money to take back home, and that is why they take longer. But then the next thing you see, you got married, because you haven't moved back home, and you are not getting married to someone home while you are here. And then the next thing you see, you have kids here, and so then your life becomes as much about being here as it is about being somewhere else, right? So that is kind of the the situation as far as do we create a system where we bring some of the best and brightest here, they get education and go back home, but what level of responsibility should the government play or take in that role so that folks do not feel like, okay, I have to stay so I can make up for whatever money my family has lost putting me through school, etc., etc., so they can go back home ASAP. And trust me, a lot of people are going home right now, especially in Ghana right now. Folks are going home because there are opportunities, there are resources, and folks want to be part of this wave that is kicking, not just in Ghana, Kenya. Like the tech scene in Kenya is bubbling right now, and a lot of folks are going back to be part of that. South Africa, actually, South Africans are not abroad that long because there are just opportunities at home and stuff like that, and a lot of them don't see the point in being here and enduring the kind of insanity that they would experience here as compared to home, as bad as it is in certain areas in South Africa. Some feel that they would rather still stay home and take advantage of opportunities there for them. So if other African countries can become mindful about it and create a structure in place that bring people here to study and take them back home and participate in that process, give them summer internships back home every year, pay for them to, their flights, all that, to come back, study, go back, do internships in the different ministries, in the different, areas in the government and stuff like that. It would be a lot more direct, a lot more coherent and consistent. But at this point, people are paying for it through their, families' funds and stuff like that. And so it gets very difficult to think about the country when, it's a family that shouldered all the burden.
Shout out to my name is Jay. Thank you for the super chat. Shout out to New Beginnings for the super chat. I appreciate the super chats, everybody who super chatted. Glad you're back on air, Dynasty. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while. I was off air for like a month because I was traveling. So I will be back in Nigeria in March. So I'll be gone March 3rd to March 18th, March 2nd to March 18th, something like that. So I will try to stream, but I doubt I will, but I will try. I will try. Let me ask you this: since I'm in Raw, shout out to Amara in Kenya, who's in Kenya. What are your thoughts in regards to China's involvement in Africa, and is this a smart long-term strategy on behalf of Africa?
Okay, I'm actually working on an article on this. Here's what I'm gonna say. When the Chinese started getting involved with African countries, what I thought it was going to become, and which I think it's now beginning to become, like a decade later, was that it was going to be an opportunity to create competition for, for the US and Europe as far as the existing IMF policies that, African governments had as their only option to do business with the West. I thought that, hey, listen, this is a good opportunity here. African leaders, African countries are going to have options to choose from, and not just like one option that essentially leaves you in indentured servitude and gives you ridiculous loan terms and stuff like that. That you literally now have to take on European decisions to be able to run your country and stuff like that. Having said that, however, I think that the Chinese agenda um, hasn't been handled properly by certain African leaders. Now, the Chinese that are doing business in Africa are not imposing their deals on you. They come to you and negotiate terms with you. And
Mhm.
you have to look at those terms and structure the terms on a way that benefits you and your people. What
Right.
I haven't been impressed by is that I think a lot of the deals have just been a bit shitty. I think the terms of the loans and stuff like that and what is given in exchange hasn't been as fair. And I think some of them have not been transparent to the countries involved. Now, don't hate me, but here is what I'm, based on the research that I'm doing, here is what I'm learning. And don't forget this. Before the trade began to happen across the Atlantic, there was actually a trade route through the east way before the trade through the Atlantic that led to slavery and stuff like that.
Right.
And
Right.
at the
I mean,
time, African,
yeah. Well, China and Africa, they've been trading partners for centuries.
exactly, exactly. And at that time, Africa was at one of its prosperous heights.
Hmm.
Like it, like trade in the east has always been prosperous for Africa. Now, believe this or not, there is a chart that is going around right now in economic circles that is showing that as much as we are criticizing Chinese African relations and the kind of business that China is doing with Africa, which, like I just said, can be improved by smarter decisions and smarter negotiation process. If you look at the chart that shows Africa's development the decade before China arrived, and you compare that to this past decade of Chinese African relations, on paper, in economic terms, Africa is actually doing better trading with China right now than it was trading with the US and Europe. Now, this is just something that I stumbled on, like literally this past week, because I'm working on an article on this particular issue. And so it's something that I would want to look a little deeper into, but I'm not surprised by it because the kind of policies that the IMF and the World Bank had with African countries were exploitative. And even though on the surface, it wasn't like you didn't see the kind of presence that the Chinese have in certain African countries right now because of the kind of business that is being done, it was still damaging to African economies way more than the current Chinese relationship with African countries. So I personally think that Chinese relations with Africa have given African countries a better option. And the US and Europe just need to come back to the table and just come with better offers than they were offering before. And African leaders just need to use their intellectuals, they need to use their economists, they need to use their smart folks to just get better deals and get and just get the best kind of situations they can for their countries. Like Chinese gonna be in Kenya abusing Kenyans, and then an African in Kenya being beaten to death, because he's dating a Chinese woman. Like China should respond to that and should explain to us why our people are being killed when their people are being protected in our countries. Like little things like that cannot
Yeah,
happen. I know,
exactly. So
I
same
know.
thing with India. Like if you're African, if you go to India, if you're African, you go to China, you do anything remotely. I mean, even look at their women; they're whooping your ass. But here in Africa, they get away with everything.
Dating, yeah, they are marrying African women and stuff like that. And I know that is also a strategy because in certain countries you cannot own business in a country unless you are connected to the country in a certain way. And so marriage has become one of the ways that they are doing that. So I don't think that I'm like no man is an island. I think Africa is going to need to do business with other people so it can sell, so it can generate revenue. I just think we need to get smarter about the kind of deals that we are making. I think we should realize that we actually have an important role at the table where we are sitting, and we need to ask for more than we are getting. Listen. Someone is approaching you saying you have something that I need. You just can't just give the person everything you have and not take anything in return. And obviously you want to be smarter about the kind of deals that you are doing so you are not losing what you have, for longer periods of time because you want the next generation to also come and benefit. So, there is a place for Chinese African relations. I'm not going to entirely dismiss it. I think it looks like it's benefiting Africans than what we had with the IMF and the World Bank. We just need to get smarter about the kind of deals we are making, and we should definitely get more than we are getting right now. That's just my take on it.
Okay. What can African Americans expect from of course Ghana has the year of return.
Right.
So
right.
what should they be looking forward to with the year of return?
Well, I think opportunities. I think and when I say opportunities, it's not just business, but it's connecting with the land, connecting with people that, believe it or not, in spite of what I don't think this is the Black Hebrew. I think this is the one that says Indian. It says Black people are Indian or whatever. But people that look like you and that sound like you and that talk like you, just the value in that. You are going to return to African countries, Ghana included, obviously, and you are going to hear music that would light a bulb.
Whoa. Let me stop you real quick. Amir Ross says, sorry to cut you off.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think China is the best thing to happen to modern Africa?
Do I think Ghana is the best thing to happen to modern Africa?
Do you think China is the best thing to happen to modern Africa?
I wouldn't say so. I just think China has just brought another option besides the exploitative option that we were limited to for decades, which was the IMF and the World Bank. But I wouldn't say the Chinese obviously present a good opportunity, so we can have another option on the table. But I think the best option is going to come from Black people. I think Black people should have a fund in the same way that the IMF and all these people are giving like loans and stuff like that. I think we Black people, if there's something that we can unite behind, maybe that should be it. We should have a fund where we give these countries loans and stuff like that, and we monitor it, and we essentially run it. And it is a fund that, if I'm a Black person and I buy into that fund, I benefit from it when money is made back. So if we give a country a loan and they pay back the loan, that money is dispersed to everyone that is contributing to that fund. I think that really is the best alternative, because everyone else that doesn't have that connection, that genuine connection to Africa, or that genuine African interest at heart, is only going to come and exploit. So, it's a good option. The Chinese option is a good option at the moment, because the only other options we had were the IMF and the World Bank. But there can be way better options. I believe that.
See what else we got here in the chat room. Everyone, again, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone who's in the chat, make sure you hit that like button. We have 232 people watching, only 130 likes. So please hit that like button. So, brother, you brought up the Indians. So when you you're where are you currently located?
In DC.
You're in DC. So when you see Black Americans, or in quotation marks, Black Americans calling themselves Hebrews and Native, African Americans in quotation marks, calling themselves Hebrews and Indians, and we ain't from Africa, we were here. Like, from an African perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
It's disappointing.
Yeah, you froze up.
Like, who am I to judge? It's just one of those things where it's like, oh wow, okay. One of my aunties, my African American aunties in Philly, a text the other day. I was like, Auntie, can you believe we did all this work and we are still doing all this work to try to unite Africans and African Americans, and now we have cousins that are saying that they even don't belong. Like, we are saying you belong, and we should have been doing something about this a long time ago, and we didn't. And now we want to do that so we can be in a situation where we can deal with the issues that we should have been dealing with that we haven't been able to deal with, so we can build and move forward. And now, but I personally think that is probably the last work left for us to do, because no one said this work was going to be easy, and it might not be done right away, but listen, if slavery hadn't happened, all these things wouldn't have happened. So, it's unfortunate that is the history, but what we can do today is figure out a way to communicate and inform, and hopefully, those who hear and feel that okay, this might be true, coming back home. And when we say coming back home, we are not saying leave America, we are not saying leave Europe or wherever you are. We are saying that you also belong to these countries, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, wherever. Just come and experience home in the same way that white people go to Ireland and they go to Netherlands and they go to the same way that Asians go to China and go to Japan and Hong Kong and all that. We are saying come home, and so. But yeah, the short answer is disappointing, it's sad, but what can you do?
Timothy Troy, thank you so much for the super chat. Now, Black Americans, we've, for the most part, been in America now for 400 years, or a little bit more, a little bit less. So fundamentally, we've become our own tribe.
Right.
Should African Americans move forward as their own tribe, or should they like integrate into African society?
Honestly, I think the last thing we need, it really depends. And here is why. In America, I think that Black Americans as a community is a really powerful force.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it is good for Black people everywhere in the world, for Black Americans to be that tribe that they are. Because, like I said, when we started the conversation, most movements around the globe around Black people or among Black people is started by Black Americans in America.
True.
Even recently, Brazil, Blacks in Brazil are benefiting from the Black Lives Movement and just the movements around embracing your Blackness, your melanin. Afro power is going up in Brazil, etc.,
Right.
etc. Just so I wouldn't want to interfere with that. There is a certain power in that. Now, should that then be disintegrated or be in Africa? I don't know. And the reason I'm saying I don't know is because my first response would be, hey, we already have so many ethnic groups. Do we need another ethnic group? Right? That would be my first response. It's like, no, you guys come and join whichever ethnic group you identify with the most. But I think this is an answer that would come with the experience. I think that, Black Americans moving back to the continent or visiting the continent will begin to express how they feel, and they will claim where they believe they belong. And that is a decision we should let them make. And if they decide that they want to be a tribe, we should let Black Americans make that decision, because the last thing we can be doing right now, considering the history, is trying to tell Black Americans how they should, return back home. Like, it cannot be on our terms. So I think that's a decision that we should leave to Black Americans, and they should say, hey, you know what? I feel I'm Ghana, or I feel I'm Igbo, or I feel I'm Yoruba, and then they can go into those ways if they want, or if they say, hey, we are going to keep our group here, our community here, and that is the way we want it, then that's fine. That's something African countries should accommodate.
Do you think African Americans should reconnect with Africa, or do you think that it shouldn't be a priority? Should it be a priority?
I think it should be a priority. I think I think there's just a sense of power. Like, if you think of how powerful African Americans are, considering majority of them have not even returned to the continent yet, imagine how more powerful they become when they go home and connect to their roots. Come on, man. Ooh, that's going to be something else. So yes, and the reason is because there's just power in being on the land and just like walking in that soil and eating that food and hearing the languages, even if you can't speak them, how empowering they are.
Yes.
And yes, please. I think this should.
Do you think tribalism has destroyed African people?
Do I think tribalism has done what?
Has destroyed African people. Like tribalism. Yeah. Do you think tribalism is coonery?
How would you define coonery, actually? Because that's a word I heard.
Me personally, I think putting the best interest over. I think putting the best interest of your tribe over moving forward as one, I would consider that coonery.
Got you. Got you. So here's the thing. I think that there is a place for tribalism, not tribalism. There's a place for being tribal, like identifying with where you come from. But
Mhm.
I think it shouldn't supersede the need of the country or the need of the entire
Right.
community. So eat your food, dance your dances. But and Kenya has actually done a better job at this than most African countries have,
Mhm.
where when they face a lot of like difficult moments, the idea of being Kenyan first was pressed upon the country, and that is how they overcame a lot of difficult moments. And I think that's something other African countries should adopt. I think Rwanda is also doing that a lot more now, where it is really about a country than being Hutu or being Tutsi,
Right.
especially after the genocide.
Right. Absolutely. Let's see what else we got here in the chat room. Shout
Yeah.
out to Doug. Shout out to Doug, our number one moderator. Shout out to Doug, everybody. Yeah, man. I mean, Ishmael, I appreciate you coming on. I really, really, really do. Tell people more, people who are just joining us, if
Okay.
you want to share with everyone and tell people more about your platform, Afropolitan Insights.
Okay. So Afropolitan Insights is we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter as I am Afropolitan. It's a platform that we created as a space to just have conversations between Africans, African Americans, and Caribbeans, just issues that concern us. And this is a platform that we created when we just realized that there really isn't a space where we can come as Black people to have conversations about things we care about. And this is not like a space to gossip or talk about this celebrity did this or that, but actually talk about like real issues that impact our communities. Um, for me, one of the underlying things that I was hoping for, and I think is happening, is because it's a community that integrates all of us, we all then begin to notice that a lot of our struggle are actually the same struggles. Whether you are African in America and you think police violence does not impact you at all, you begin to realize, oh wait, hold on. Police violence is something that could impact your kid because when a police is doing something, they are sometimes when they pull a gun, they are not waiting to see ask that kid their last name or to hear their accent. They are just gonna act, and that's something that can impact you. Okay, whether dealing with funding, whether dealing with housing issues, whatever it is. And so this space is just a space where we discuss issues that concern the community, impact the community, and also share cultural things, videos, music, stuff like that. And we use this platform to create other cultural experiences like the Ankara Bazaar, which is like um, African print, dresses that most folks like to wear. We bring out a lot of vendors. We come to Philly. We come to.
Now, are you coming to Atlanta?
Yes, we are coming to Atlanta again. This I believe we are coming in June for
Okay. What we'll do, we gotta have you back on so you could and you guys also do like a jollof
the
off,
Jollof
right?
Festival. Yeah, we do the Jollof Festival.
Now, this is my issue with that. Was Senegal represented at the jollof off?
So Senegal was represented. Here's what I'm going to tell
Good,
you.
good. Okay, I'm happy. I'm
Okay,
tired of
yeah.
the jollof offs and it's just Ghana and Nigeria.
No.
That's the
It's,
best
it's
jollof.
five countries. It's Senegal, it's Ghana, it's Nigeria, it's Liberia,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes you have Guinea or you have Sierra Leone, depending on which part of the country you are in and where you can find their food. Yeah.
Okay, good.
But,
I
but I
can't
know,
now listen. I tried to come last year, but parking, like by the time I got there, parking was crazy. Guys,
I
you
heard,
guys gotta come. And then people are like, all the food was gone. Like when I was
yeah,
parking, people are like, yeah, man, all the food is almost gone.
yeah, Atlanta went crazy on us because we didn't see Atlanta showing up the way they did. And so it was one of those things where it was our first time there, and we said, hey, you know what? There might be 300 people, and we lied. It was crazy. So food ran out, and we didn't want to let people in without food. So we said, all right, we'll come back next year.
Mhm.
I need to even chat with you about this because we are looking into alternative spaces to do that so we can have more people coming to participate.
Oh yeah, I can definitely help out with that. I can help you with that.
We can chat offline about that later.
Yeah, I could definitely help out with that. So Ankara Bazaar, we got the Jollof off. I should be in. I don't plan on traveling in June, so I
Okay.
should be around in June. I don't plan on traveling. at
Okay.
all in June. So I should be around. Just let me know. Let me know the dates, and I'll definitely be there.
Okay, I'll do that.
I will definitely be there. But also too, let's close out on this. I know offline we were talking about how when you first saw the platform, my platform, you didn't exactly agree with the direction I was going in.
Yeah. So okay. So I was like, man, who is this guy? I feel like he's going into spaces that I wouldn't put up first if, as an African, if someone wants to see, my country. And so I was, I'm sensitive because, we Africans, we've had a history of being represented in a certain way by Western media. So we are very sensitive about that. A lot of people are like, oh, why are Africans always, trying to polish and trying to look? It's just because for a long period of time, Western media just put images about us out there, uh, that made it look like we were all starving and we're all hungry and stuff like that. And so we are just very sensitive about that. Anyway, so when I saw your stuff, I was like, man, who is this brother and why is he going to these spaces? Come on, man, does he need me to introduce him to someone back home so they'll let him, they'll let him see these other parts? But with time, I just realized that you just genuinely enjoy the experience and you weren't just showcasing just one part of it. That is number one. Number two, I also realized, you know what? There's no need to be sensitive about this. What he's showing is also part of the African narrative, and that is someone's reality that needs to be shown and someone's story that needs to be told. The fact that I do not live in a place that looks like this or like that does not mean that there isn't someone that isn't living like this or like that there, right? So initially, I was a bit, frustrated with you. I was a bit skeptical. I was like, come on, man, this brother, But with time, I feel like you are showing the different facets of things, and I think you are doing a great job. And I appreciate the fact that you are taking your own time because not many people get to take time to actually help other people understand what is going on and to bring the kind of different perspectives that you are bringing to it. Like you have a lot of people traveling and they just go to the beach and they take pictures of the beach, and I appreciate that because it looks good, it makes us look good. But sometimes we also need to face the raw facts of what some of the spaces look like, because these are all things that need to be fixed and improved and stuff like that. So it is what it is. But yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan before, but we are embracing the narratives that you are bringing in, and we also learning. Like I told you, a lot of us Africans haven't been to other African countries before. So sometimes I see some videos that you have up in Nigeria. I'm like, oh wait, I thought the gate of return was only in Cape Coast. I didn't realize there was one in Nigeria. I didn't realize there was, I knew there were ports out of those spaces in Senegal, but I didn't know the gate of no return specifically was also in these places. So I'm learning a lot through the videos you are putting up, and I appreciate you for that.
Thank you. But you know what? I was really shocked by that because I know a lot of Africans who've not left their immediate African country where they're from.
Yeah.
In other countries. I was shocked by that.
Yeah, because it's so easy. Like I said before, it's so easy to leave Atlanta and come to New York. It's so easy to go to Chicago, etc. But back home, it's just not that easy to move between countries because you are not moving between states. You are moving between countries. I know they are introducing a new passport now,
Right.
where they are going to make it very easy to move between the countries, like you move between states. But the only time, think about it, like the only time Africans get to talk about other Africans used to be during the African Cup of Nations. And Ghanaians would be like, oh, we are going to beat Nigeria or Senegal or whatever, Cameroon. We want to win the African Cup. Otherwise, we are all in our countries, just like trying to fix our shit, like literally. Excuse my French, but that's So it's now that we are all getting curious. Like the first time I literally ate with Nigerians was in college in America. The first time I hanged out with Senegalese folks was in college in America. It's like we had to come to the West to meet each other. That's how crazy it is. And hopefully we can fix all these things because, you know.
Well, brother Ishmael, thank you so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate it. Glad we had this conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, cool. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you go to Search for Uhuru on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook. Also, make sure you like and subscribe, family. And make sure you go to Afropolitan Insights. Make sure you go to his platform and like, subscribe, and share, and all that good stuff. So until next time, family, Dynasty Mirror Search for Uhuru. Peace.
All right, Bill. Thank you.
Roll inside.